Everybody talks about the new Tren Maya ride, but nobody tells you how to get from the train stations, which are often miles out of town, to your hotel door without getting ripped off or stranded. Welcome back, I'm Bill Hare from Affordable Retirement Abroad. I just finished riding the Tren Maya 3 separate times to 3 different major hubs, Valladolid, Mérida, and Campeche. The Tren Maya is incredible. It's fast, it's gorgeous, and it's changing travel in the Yucatán. But there is one massive flaw that no one is talking about. The train ride is easy, but the moment you arrive at the Cancun airport to start your journey, the chaos begins. And in every single city, the biggest challenge wasn't buying the ticket, it was solving the last mile problem. Today, I'm showing you the unvarnished reality of Tren Maya transfers, so you can be prepared. Let's go! Your journey starts here. You land in Cancun. The Tren Maya station is not at the airport terminal, but on Google Maps it looks really close. Can you walk it? Absolutely not. It's across a major highway, so you have to find the connector bus. Here I am, leaving the Cancun Airport Terminal 4, searching in vain for any signs for the Tren Maya connector shuttle. It's 7 a.m., and I just arrived after a sleepless red-eye from the west coast, so I'm not really ready for this. Prior to arriving, I learned there is a shuttle designed for this very purpose, and the cost is either 35 pesos, about $2, or free, depending on who your driver is. Anyhow, I couldn't find any signage about the train, so after wandering fruitlessly for 10 minutes, I approached the ADO bus ticket lady. ADO is the major bus line in this part of Mexico. ADO is very highly regarded and the primary public transportation connecting cities in the Yucatán. I can't imagine they're thrilled about competition from the Tren Maya. I asked the ADO lady in Spanish where I could get the Tren Maya connector shuttle from. She told me it's arriving right here, and she pointed to a parking space right behind her and said it leaves at 8:20. Then she told me to pay the driver when he arrives. So for the next 40 minutes, I stand around, and I mean stand as there are no seats at all outside the terminal, and right on time this big, beautiful, pristine Tren Maya bus pulls in. Looks like problem solved, but the bus driver tells me in Spanish that I can't pay him, I need to pay the ADO bus lady, the very lady who told me I need to pay him. Fearing an endless payment feedback loop would derail my journey before it even starts, I went back to her and she agreed to accept my 35 pesos. I got my ticket and was on my way. 8 minutes later, I arrived at the shiny new Tren Maya Cancun Airport Terminal and boarded my very comfortable and clean train. Mission accomplished. Grade for this transfer? C+. C for confusing. According to my ticket, the train from the airport to the charming colonial city of Valladolid left at 9:30 and arrived at 10:02. That's 32 minutes. But note to future travelers, en route you cross from the Eastern time zone to the Central time zone, so the trip was actually an hour and a half. After a comfortable ride, I arrived in Valladolid, disembarked the train, and steeled myself for a similarly confusing transfer adventure. However, the Valladolid Tren Maya station totally has its act together. As I stepped off the train and headed to the terminal, there was a very friendly and bilingual person guiding passengers to the ticket booth for the shuttle bus, which was actually an ADO bus dedicated to this route into downtown Valladolid. The buses are timed to coordinate with the train. The cost, once again, was around $2. The entire process of transferring from the train to the bus and into downtown Valladolid was effortless, seamless, stressless. Last, the bus drops you off at the ADO bus terminal right in the heart of the city, within easy walking distance of most hotels. Grade for this transfer? A for frickin' awesome. A few days later, for the return trip, I visited this same ADO terminal the day before my trip back to the Tren Maya station to confirm what time the bus leaves the following morning and to buy my transfer ticket in advance. The next morning, I arrived at the ADO terminal for my bus, 30 minutes before scheduled departure, and chaos, which I avoided on the way into town, returned with a vengeance. Even though there was a big electronic sign showing the ADO Tren Maya shuttle bus leaving at its appointed time, unfortunately, several other buses were scheduled to leave within 5 minutes of my bus. We were only allowed to board our buses after a man with a very loud and raspy voice announced, in Spanish only, that it was time to board your bus. I soon learned the other 2 buses leaving at the same time were nearly full, whereas for the Tren Maya shuttle bus, I turned out to be the only passenger. Worse, the loud man announcing the buses called for people to board the bus scheduled to leave after mine to actually board before mine. This was confusing, and still is, even though I understand Spanish pretty well. Finally, he barked, "Tren Maya," and I scuttled along quickly to my, as it turned out, private bus. But he only shouted "Tren Maya" once, and I was sure to be standing right next to him when he did, so be aware of this. From there on, it was smooth sailing back to the terminal. Grade for this transfer, B, for better be ready to hop on that bus fast. After a relaxing train ride through the jungle and past the famed Mayan ruins of Chichen Itza, I arrived at the biggest hub on the Tren Maya route, Mérida, a city of 1.2 million and a thriving expat retiree population. This transfer, or should I say transfers, was by far the most complicated and Byzantine. I knew from prior research that getting into town on public transportation would be a 2-step process. By the way, I've been avoiding cabs, assuming they would try to gouge me. Anyhow, Mérida has recently built a fleet of electric trams called the IE-TRAMs. They were reputed to be cool and futuristic, and I really wanted to check them out. But I knew in advance that they'd drop you off in a part of downtown Mérida at the Parque La Plancha station that is much more than walking distance to my hotel in the Centro Zone. So I assumed there would be taxis at the La Plancha station for the final 5-minute ride to my hotel. Silly me. Anyhow, the first step was to find the futuristic IE-TRAM at the Tren Maya Mérida station. By the way, there's a second, much smaller Mérida Tren Maya station in Uman, south of the city, but that was out of my way. So, leaving the terminal, I quickly beheld the future. Take a look at this e-bus. The bus costs around the standard 35 pesos or $2 and was popular with the few tourists and the many locals alike. After 20 minutes, we arrived at the La Plancha station. I disembarked to head to the taxi stand, except there wasn't one. Now, this is a big bus station, so I asked the attendant inside in Spanish where to find a taxi. She said there was no taxi stand and taxis don't come to the bus station. Of course they don't. This was confuzzling. She added, helpfully, she thought, that if I walked down the road a while until I reached a street corner, a taxi might pass by. Armed with this useless intel, I walked out of the station and spied a group of 4 gringo-looking college-age kids. I overheard them speaking English and asked them how they planned to get into the city. They said most people have their own cars and the only other way was Uber or DiDi. But they said use DiDi, it's much cheaper than Uber. The mention of DiDi perked my interest amidst all the frustration. I had read about this relative newcomer to the Mexico ride-hailing app industry and was eager to give them a try. So, in about 5 minutes, I downloaded the DiDi app for the first time onto my phone and logged in instantly using my Google account. No need for a password or anything. I opened up the app, it immediately ID'd where I was. I guess this app gets a lot of customers at this bus station. Then I plugged in my hotel and almost immediately a driver appeared. The app told me in advance what model car he was driving, his name, and the license plate. All drivers are vetted by DiDi, I later learned. So my driver, Rodrigo, picked me up in minutes, dropped me downtown at my hotel 5 minutes later, all for the bargain price of around $3, since I got a discount coupon from DiDi for my first ride. So that's how I got into Mérida from the Tren Maya station. I highly recommend to you to download the DiDi app onto your phone ahead of your trip. Last, I've now used DiDi several times and it's been great. It will be my go-to choice for transfers in big cities that otherwise require multiple transfers. Grade for this transfer, B-, for boy, I wish I knew about DiDi, but the IE-TRAM was really cool. 4 days later, when it was time to leave Mérida to board the train for Campeche, I simply used DiDi and painlessly arrived 25 minutes later at the Tren Maya station for around $6. Grade for this transfer, A, for about time I figured this out. Finally, the third leg of my journey, Mérida to Campeche. The colonial walled city of Campeche is much smaller than Mérida. I learned just before my trip there that DiDi had recently established itself in Campeche, so when I arrived at the typically brand new spotless terminal, I was pleased when the DiDi app found me a driver within a minute. In fact, the driver himself, Carlos, had just dropped off a traveler departing on the train, so this was set up to be too good to be true, which it turned out it was. The app showed that Carlos had arrived in a small compact car, but I could see no Carlos or car, and I was all alone at the exit to the station. Then my phone rang on the WhatsApp app, and it was Carlos asking me in Spanish, where was I? Turns out this station actually has 2 separate levels that look equally like the outside waiting area where you should be picked up. Carlos was on the upper level, I was waiting on the matching lower level. But it was fine in the end. Carlos did a lap around the station and found me on the lower level. The ride to my hotel was easy, 25 minutes and around $7. Grade for this transfer, B+, for bi-level stations are confusing. So there you have it. 3 separate trips on the shiny new Tren Maya and 6 transfers to and from the shiny new stations. Transfers of varying degrees of difficulty. My bottom line assessment is yes, it's no doubt true that the stations were built well outside of the city centers most of us want to visit. This ain't Europe, where in many cities the train station is at the very heart. Nevertheless, I did successfully make these transfers. Just allow a bit more time when you make this trip yourself. I hope this video gave you an accurate flavor for how the transfer process actually works in 2026. Remember, the Tren Maya is still new and ironing out the logistical wrinkles. By the time you ride the train, you may have a smoother experience. But even with the bumps, I highly recommend this adventure. What could be more fun and romantic than riding the rails in an exotic new land? See you in the next video.